Welcome back to the channel. No, I did not get all of a sudden much better looking. I had to go to the dermatologist and get a bunch of spots on my face frozen off. As if I wasn't ugly enough, I have all of these terrible spots where they froze off what they think was precancerous freckles, whatever. So you guys have to look at that, unfortunately. I'll try to keep the box really small in the upper right hand corner so you don't have to look at my stupid face right now. We've got some items that sold on eBay, mostly loose graded, but I called it a potpourri edition because that not everything were loose graded for this video, but all of these items sold on eBay and gives you an idea of what is selling out there as you are trying to add to your collection. So let's take a closer look. We're going to start off with the Muffin Man. He had some ungraded items that I thought were worth talking about. We had the Cantina Adventure Set with the box, the used contents, and then all four of the Cantina creatures. And the blue snags look pretty nice from the photos. Let's see if we can get a close-up of him. There he is. I'm shocked he didn't want us to grade that one. He's typically a guy that likes to grade stuff, but the blue snags, you know, it did have some discoloration there on the torso, but otherwise it was pretty nice. I mean, it was certainly like a 75 plus grade. But I think that's probably the reason why he didn't grade it, is that, the discoloration to the torso would hold that back. But anyway, very nice set that was sold in an auction and sold for 700 pounds, which is about 922 US dollars, with probably about half of that value, a little under half of that value, coming from the blue snags. So pretty decent deal there. You also had this, which was incredible. This was the Jawa Sandcrawler, and it was complete and in working condition as well. It included the used sticker sheet, all of the paperwork inside the box, and the inserts, the cardboard inserts. So this is truly a beautiful example of the radio-controlled Jawa Sandcrawler. And in an auction, it sold for big money, $1,500, which is 1,975 US dollars. I don't know if it would have gotten that kind of price here in the US, but it did manage to get that price over there in the UK. It even included a video showing that the radio-controlled Jawa Sandcrawler is in working condition. So that's pretty cool to show that one in action. But anyway, big number for the Jawa Sandcrawler, complete with paperwork and box, at $1,975. He also had this Return of the Jedi Shelf Talker. So this was a Palatoy example. As you can see in this photo, it's got the Palatoy logo on this Shelf Talker. Lots of wear to the front of it. So this was very well used by some shopkeeper in the UK during the sale of the Return of the Jedi line of toys. That one sold for 230 pounds in an auction, 303 US dollars, which seems about right given the condition for that Shelf Talker. Next up, this was another big sale that I was surprised this one went as high as it did. I had a couple of Patreon members that were bidding on this, and they were really clean examples. So I'll say that is that, you're paying for very nice examples of the original TIE Fighter as well as the X-Wing. And the stickers looked to be in pretty good shape overall. X-Wing had a couple of spots, but in general, they were nice and bright white, very clean, especially the TIE Fighter. The TIE Fighter was super clean looking. And so those two together sold in an auction for $510. That's a big number for two really nice vehicles. You could make an argument that the X-Wing's canopy is starting to yellow a little bit, but otherwise the wings and everything, no yellowing that I can really see on that at all. And the TIE Fighter especially, I thought, was a very nice example. So $510 for those two together. Some loose graded that sold at auction. We had Boba Fett, a Taiwan Boba Fett UKG 85, and it seems like the prices on Boba Fett's continue to drop lower and lower. And this was, again, a very high grade example with a new case towel, and it still only sold for 116 pounds, which is about $154. That seems really low to me. But the same seller also had this, and I thought this was actually a really fair price. and at the lower end of where I would value it. But this is the Spanish Puck Bosque. And, you know, I've had a request from some viewers who are maybe new to a lot of these weird variants, but the Spanish Puck factory was obviously over in Spain, and they denote two different Spanish figures. There's the Puck, which are the earlier examples of the Spanish figures, and then they eventually, I can't remember what years, around 1981-ish, they merged with PBP, and the PBP name is what lived on afterwards. The Puck figures typically were imported Hong Kong parts that they assembled and painted in Spain, in the Spanish factory. So that's my rudimentary memory of what the Spanish kind of factories' histories are. There's obviously a lot better guides to that. If you are really interested in Spanish figures, there are guidebooks by Javier Ruy Lopez that go through the detailed history of the Spanish figures. But I find this Spanish Puck figure to be tougher to find than what's called the Toxic Limbs variant of Bosque, which has bright green paint for the arms and the feet, and those are very desirable. They're obviously much more expensive just given the bright green color difference, but I find this one to be harder to find, which is more the traditional colors for the, you know, the traditional Kenner colors. But these Pucks are, in my opinion, a little harder to find. I know that's not true because the Toxic Limbs brighter green variation is much more expensive, but it just seems like when I was putting together kind of different Bosque variants, the standard color scheme Spanish Puck for Bosque, I just could never find one, or they would sell immediately. But I was thinking like 450. Well, that was kind of my number, 400 at the low end, but it ended up going for less. It ended up going in an auction. It was a UKG 80%, but most Spanish figures are very low. You know, the early Spanish Puck figures, they just, you're not going to see many of them that are in 85 grades. There's not a lot of that because the plastic they used degrades, the paint they used degrades, the sonic welding to hold the figure together degrades and falls apart in your hand. I mean, there's just so many kind of factory defects for the early Spanish figures that you don't usually see them in 85 and 90 grades. They happen. I had a few, like an IG-88 that was a 90 grade that was very nice, but it just doesn't happen that often. So an 80 grade I consider to be about as good as it gets for the Bosque. So that one sold for $355 in terms of US dollars, 270 pounds. I mean, I'd pay that in a heartbeat. I would have paid up to $450 really in terms of US dollars. So that was a good deal, I thought. We had a CAS 80 Trash Monster, AFA 80 Trash Monster archival case, AFA 80. That sold for $86, which I don't know why that sold so cheap. I mean, it is an 80 grade. It's not like the highest in the world, but that to me felt like a really good deal for, you know, a pretty nice example that displays nicely. Brown's 8888 had a bunch of sales. I only picked out 2 or 3 of them, but this was the brown snake, dark green skin Yoda. I mean, I don't really call that the dark green. I call that the light green, but that is the brown snake version of Yoda, AFA 85. That one sold for $225, which is about right for, you know, an 85 grade. But the big number was this one. So this was an 85 plus grade for the Biker Scout. And it's tough to find any Biker Scout in an 85, much less an 85 plus gold level. This was a Hong Kong COO, but I mean, I don't remember the last time we've seen an 85 plus for a loose graded Biker Scout on eBay. And the price reflected that. It was $728. So a huge number, but you know, again, I probably should have looked at the population report. I bet it's pretty low. I bet it's pretty darn low. But beautiful figure. No yellowing to the white armor at all, and then there's no, you know, scratches or paint defects to the hands and arms in black, and that was a beautiful figure. And $728, that's mint on card territory, so clearly there is a market for those high grade, tough to find items. Some baggies that sold, we had a Boba Fett baggie. This was a, you know, an ESB baggie, factory sealed. That sold for $355. And then going back to the Muffin Man, he had a UKG 90% Euro baggie for Snaggletooth. I thought that was a pretty nice sale there at 227 US dollars or 172 pounds. And that's a really good deal to me for a nice to find, harder to find European baggie for Snaggletooth. And some other loose graded. This is one I sent out to my Patreon supporters. I don't know if they bought it, but it sold almost immediately after it got listed. And that was an 85 plus grade for the Cloud Car Pilot. You never see an 85 plus or a 90 for the Cloud Car Pilot. That's a very tough one to find. And that one sold for $340. That's in my opinion, a pretty fair deal. I would argue that in an auction, it probably would go even higher. But just based on that Biker Scout sale, I mean, I would argue that this is just as tough to find in an 85 plus grade. So great buy there at $340. We had a Blue Snags loose graded and a Yak Face loose graded from this seller. And at the same time these were ending, Brian's Toys also had a loose graded Blue Snags and Yak Face. So I wanted to do the comparison here to show you. This was an AFA 80 old case style for Blue Snags. This is the no dent in boot variation that sold for $677. And then Brian's Toys had a 75 plus grade. This one did have the toe dent, but newer case style as well. So 75 plus new with the toe dent, $612. AFA 80 no toe dent old case style sold for $677. So pretty comparable prices there. Yak Face old case style AFA 80 sold for $598. And then Brian's Toys had an AFA 80 new case style that sold for $611. So about $13 difference on those two for the same grade with the difference in case style there. Next up, we did have the Ewok Battle Wagon loose complete that sold one bid for $400. 100% complete, excellent condition, $400 on one bid there. And then we had some factory sealed 12-inch figures that sold at auction. First was the R2-D2 factory sealed, $611 on that one. And then same seller also had the Obi-Wan Kenobi factory sealed. That sold for $356. Both of those were in pretty good shape overall. So pretty good deals there. And then finally, another, what I would consider to be a pretty good deal. This was a CAS 80 plus grade for the Imperial Shuttle. And this one was factory sealed. You can see there it's got the red label, factory sealed 80 plus grade. And it was listed for $22.50, which I think is a pretty fair asking price. And it sold for $2,000. We've certainly seen comparably graded factory sealed Imperial shuttles go for $2,500 plus. So great deal there, I think, for a CAS 80 plus Imperial shuttle. Best offer accepted was $2,000. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at recent sales for vintage Star Wars action figures, vehicles, playsets, things like that. I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll be back soon.